The next, we'll have roll call. Secretary, please.
Please let the record show that all planning commissioners are present.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is reorganization. So we'll entertain a nomination for chair.
Mr. Chair, first off, I want to thank you for your leadership on this commission over the past year. As a past chairman, I know how difficult it can be sometimes to sit in the middle. But you've done a great job, and I really appreciate everything you've done in this last year. And with that, I'd like to nominate Vice Chair Opal for the chairman or chairwoman.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay. Please, we'll vote unless we have anything else? Any other comments?
We vote on that first?
Yes?
Okay.
It's unanimous. Congratulations. And the next item on the agenda would be nominating for vice chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, again, second what Commissioner Nelson said about, I really appreciate your leadership in the past year, and you've done an excellent job of running the meetings and being insightful and stuff. But with that, I would propose, I make a motion that we recommend Commissioner Nelson for the position of vice chair.
And I second it, whole-throated.
Thank you. So please vote. Unanimous again. Congratulations. And now I would like to turn the meeting over to the new chairperson, Sopel.
All right, so we'll move on to approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
Madam Chair, I'd make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Second. All right, if we can go ahead and vote on that. Sorry, that passes 3 with 2 abstaining since they were absent last week. So moving forward to public comments, were there any public comments for anything other than what was on the agenda?
No, Chair.
Great, thank you. Okay, having no public comments, we'll move on to consent calendar. There were no items on the consent calendar for this meeting. So that moves us to public hearing item 3 for the Coastal Development Permit CDP 19-0006 and Site Development Permit SDP 19-0013 for a 74 square foot addition and remodel to convert a duplex to a single family residence located at 35131 Beach Road. And do we have a staff report this evening?
Yes, Chair Opal, Senior Planner John Champ will provide a presentation.
Good evening, Chair Opal and Planning Commissioners. John Champ, I'm the case planner for the requested coastal development permit and site development permit for the Irani residence. The subject property is located within the Capistrano Bay Community Services District within the community of Capistrano Beach in Dana Point. The zoning for the property is residential Beach Road duplex 18. And the property is located within the floodplain 3 overlay. The subject property is also located within the coastal overlay as well as the Coastal Commission appeals jurisdiction area for the city. Just to give you a little background on this property, it is a 3,300 square foot duplex that's 2 stories that was constructed in 1959 with a attached 2-car garage. The structure is considered legal non-conforming because it has a slab-on-grade foundation within the floodplain overlay 3, which requires caisson design construction to elevate the structure above any coastal hazard wave action. The subject project is to convert the duplex to a single-family residence, which would include enclosing the second floor inland deck, which would result in a 74 square foot addition. The project would also involve remodeling, which would convert the Unit B, or the second floor unit, the kitchen, into the master bedroom, as well as remodeling the wet bar area and the bathroom on the landward side of the structure. Exterior improvements would also include demolition of the exterior stairs that provided access to the upper unit, as well as new bedrooms, new windows and doors, and new exterior wood siding. This is the existing front elevation of the structure. As you can see, it represents the 1950s mid-century modern architectural design. This is the site plan of this proposed project. As you can see, it conforms to all the necessary setback requirements. And you can see here in the center in blue is the proposed addition that would enclose the existing second-story deck. This is the first floor plan. As you can see here, the only proposed improvements here would be associated with the internal stair access that would be provided to that new second floor master bedroom area. And then this is the second floor. As you can see here on the lower image, the locations of the remodeling as stated for the master bathroom, bedroom area, internal access for the stairs, as well as the wet bar and bathroom. These are the proposed exterior elevations of the structure. It would remain generally intact with the exception of the proposed windows and doors, as well as the new wood siding. The project conforms to all the necessary requirements for the coastal development permit, given that it complies with all the necessary standards identified in the city's local coastal program, as well as that there are no impacts to public access or recreation. As you can see, public access is located here at Capistrano Beach Park, 960 feet from the subject site. The subject property and project requires a site development permit because of the proposed one-time 10% addition, as well as a remodel. Now, per the zoning ordinance, it would allow for a 10% of the valuation of the structure for the remodel for structures that are legal non-conforming. So the project conforms to this, given that the addition is only 2% at 74 square feet. Now, the proposed remodel is valued at 35%. However, it has been conditioned to not allow for any future improvements for 3.5 years to ensure compliance with this section. The proposed application does comply with all the necessary requirements located or identified in the city's local coastal program, as well as does not have any impact to public access or recreation, and is in conformance with the Coastal Act, and complies with all the necessary findings for the coastal development permit, as well as the site development permit. That concludes staff's presentation. Staff's recommending approval of the coastal development permit and site development permit, subject to the findings identified in the draft resolution before you. Staff and the applicant are available for any questions that you may have.
Okay, thank you for that report. We'll turn it over to the commissioners if there are any questions at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got one question. On the 35% requirement, so can you walk me through where we've done this before and what the provisions are to allow for essentially changing or exceeding the 10%? And then make sure I'm clear that if, I guess the question would be if the remodel begins or they complete it a year from now, we have a situation where there's some damage to the home, what then happens? So if you could walk me through those two, that'd be great.
Certainly. So as you can see here, this is the code section for legal nonconforming structures located in the FP3. The section in red identifies the remodeling and the limitations associated with the 10%, and it identifies it in this last section as determined by the Director of Community Development. So there was an interpretation made by the previous Community Development Director identifying in situations where proposed remodeling improvements that are considered to be ordinary would be allowed to exceed that 10% if essentially a deed restriction were recorded on the property limiting any future improvements for that designated time period, at which time those that annual improvements would be reduced 10% a year up until the time where those remodel improvements have been exhausted. This has been conducted by staff for improvements that have been interior and have not required any kind of a discretionary review. However, this would be the first that was before the Planning Commission, given the proposed addition associated with the project, which required the coastal development permit and the site development permit. So in the event a issue were to occur, whether it be some kind of roof damage or something associated with that, that would be something that would be a life safety related issue, so those improvements would be allowed to be made. That would potentially be factored into that 10% because, and basically would limit future improvements that were more elective than necessary to protect the structure.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Donor?
The other item that you had mentioned as a potential condition was items 17 through 21 related to the foundation. And obviously this property is subject to the potential of tide coming in, and normally they would be on piers. So since this is not that, why wouldn't we check the foundation to see if that's going to be required before we approve this?
So given that the proposed improvements are essentially interior remodeling and a 74 square foot addition on the second level, enclosing that deck, it doesn't meet the threshold for bringing a non-conforming structure up to conformance. That would typically be demolition of 50% of the linear length of the walls, of all walls within the structure. So therefore, it would be allowed to be maintained as non-conforming for that foundation design within the floodplain overlay. In addition to that, staff has placed these conditions on here to ensure that these proposed improvements are considered ordinary, which would comply with this particular section, typically the threshold being that there be no foundation modifications for the remodel portion of the structure, to ensure that this provision of the code is met and is not exceeded through the design of the project and when the more technical construction documents are prepared. And notes have even been applied to the discretionary plans to ensure that no new foundations would be proposed for the project.
One other question. What is the basis of the value of the property? Is that tax basis, market value?
So the value is based on a standardized valuation sheet that the building department has put together. So essentially that covers any and all improvements to the structure. So that basis, we use that as our essentially in establishing the value of the structure, which is typically at a cost of about $196 per square foot. That's essentially our baseline to determine what is 10% of that. And then we evaluate the scope of the project to determine what are the proposed improvements. Those all have their own specific valuation, like remodeling of the master bedroom or the bathroom. That's at $117 per square foot. Window replacements have their own valuation, as well as the roof and siding. So all of those are computed together to determine what that total valuation is, and that's what's evaluated as part of this.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner McCann, you had questions?
Yeah, thank you. Regarding this destructive testing, what's the purpose of it?
The purpose of it is to ensure that any of the proposed remodeling the foundation design that is there is sufficient to accommodate any proposed remodel improvements. Given that this is at the conceptual design phase of the project, it's difficult and challenging for an existing, operating, functioning home to do that level of destructive testing, essentially, cut some different sections of the flooring out to determine, the thickness of the foundation, where those foundations are located. So this is essentially a way to ensure that those foundation designs are understood to ensure that the project design can move forward without any new foundations. This has been discussed with the applicant, and they are in agreement with this condition.
Okay, so it seems to me that the general scope of the project is a relatively simple remodel. And it's not, changing the structural systems of the home in a significant way. So I'm challenged to understand why destructive testing would be required. I guess, let me ask a follow-on question. If this home was a home across the street, would destructive testing be required there on a similar scope of remodel?
I think if you're going to be using the existing foundation, and maybe you don't, because this was built in 1959, or the house across the street, let's say it was built in 1959, not knowing what's there and what's being proposed to accommodate that, when you're moving some walls around and doing some different structural modifications, this was seen as something that was necessary. And then in addition to that, in the floodplain overlay district, or floodplain overlay, one of the key components of the remodel is that no new foundation designs are going to be proposed. So that's necessary to ensure that this remains as an ordinary improvement and not something that would be more than that.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Because otherwise I would say, normally you would just say, hey, I'm having a post here, I put a column here, a 18 by 18 pad or whatever, and calling it out. But if you guys don't allow that because of the FP3, then that's a different deal. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Murphy, did you have any questions? Okay, John, I do have one question. On the 35% where you were doing the 3.5 years to expire the restrictions for the future permits, when does that timing start? Does that start when the permit's pulled, when you do final, or at what point in time does that clock start ticking?
That starts at the time that the permit is pulled.
Okay, thank you. Sure.
Regarding that 3.5-year moratorium on improvements, just out of curiosity, did anyone ever consider if we do that backward looking? Like, if he hasn't made any improvements in the last 3.5 years, should that count as his 3.5 years of non-improvement?
Staff did look at that and consider that during the interpretation process. However, staff felt that given the interpretation of the code and the intent of the code, or I guess more so the intent of the code, staff felt that it was most appropriate to have it moving forward.
Okay, at this time, we'll open this for a public hearing. Are there any requests to speak?
There were no requests to speak, Chair Opal.
All right, so I will close the public hearing and open it up for commissioner discussion. Anybody? Mr. McCann?
It sounds like, well, it's obvious that this is a well thought through and good design, and I compliment you on doing it within the strict confines of the requirements down in that location. I know that's not easy, and it sounds also like staff did a really good job evaluating it and conditioning it appropriately. In my opinion, I agree with the findings found in the staff report that it complies with the requirements, and I'll be supportive of this project.
I also support the project. I think it's well done, and the only other question I had is whether or not is the value of the property increases, would that affect the timing? So if the appreciation took place at a greater rate than I guess use the same number then for the 3 years?
Yes, because it's just purely on a cost per square foot. It's not on improvement valuation. So the only element of that is the per square foot.
Okay. Well, I support the project.
I don't have much to say, except that I think the project's great, and I went down and peeked through and looked at it. I don't know how much better the project could be made. I think they've taken it and used what's there. And so often we see down in Beach Road, and I'm not disparaging anyone, but there are some very small projects that then become huge and right there on the water, and it takes away the view of some of the other people. And this is just very well done, and very happy to see it.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add relative to the project itself. I think it's a great project, and I'd love to see when we save stuff. I would I'm concerned slightly with the way it's being done, and would maybe we'll talk through this another night. But what's not clear to me is where the line is on how far and how many years out we can push projects. And so where's that line? If it's sort of at the director's discretion, my hope would be that applicants, as they come through the door, can guesstimate what that actually means. And I don't know if we have that, but if we don't, I think it's something to be discussed. Not tonight, obviously, because it's project specific. But it seems a bit gray to me, so I just want to make sure that everybody gets a fair shake when they come to the planning department.
Okay, I don't have any comments beyond what my fellow commissioners have already provided, so I would entertain a motion.
I would move that we approve coastal development permit CDP 190006 and site development permit SDP 190013 for a 74 square foot addition and remodel to convert a duplex to a single family residence located at 35131 Beach Road.
Second.
So we can vote on that? Okay, so that's a unanimous approval. Congratulations. So moving on to old business, there is no old business. Moving on to new business, there is no new business. Do we have any staff reports this evening?
Just briefly, congratulations to Chair Opal and Vice Chair Nelson. Also, last meeting, I believe it was last meeting, Vice Chair Nelson asked about the status of the city's ADU ordinance. And I mentioned I was bringing it back to the Planning Commission at the first meeting in March, and that will be brought back as a workshop type of discussion. We only have one other item on the agenda that night, so I would propose us to maintain our 6 o'clock start time and include the workshop as part of our normal meeting time. So that's all I have to offer tonight. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any commissioner comments this evening?
I think the commission's not aware of the fact that there's an initiative going forward regarding view preservation with plants. Maybe you could speak to that.
Certainly. City staff had a small meeting with a few residents this past Wednesday to discuss a landscape ordinance, which some are calling a view ordinance. And it's the initial steps of looking at if we might be able to create an ordinance that might allow both retroactive consideration of impacts from trees on private views, as well as looking forward as projects get developed and landscape gets put in place. The palette can be developed to ensure that private views are maintained. So we're in the early stages. We are going to be meeting again in March and developing a set of principles and goals. And the idea is once those are established, we would be bringing those forward to the city council for them to actually provide us direction to if we want to initiate an ordinance. So I anticipate us to be doing more broader outreach to the community to ensure that we have broad representation in this endeavor. So it's in the early stages, but it's getting along. Thank you.
Regarding that, could I please be invited, or, when those are noticed? I shouldn't say not invited. I don't need some special invitation, but noticed. I'm guessing that maybe my fellow planning commissioners would like that as well, although we should coordinate to make sure we don't have too many people there. Maybe if we're intending to go, we notify you, and if you get too many yeses, then you tell some of us to.
Certainly, I'll make sure the commissioners are aware, and if there's any issues of a Brown Act violation, then we'll make sure to remedy that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments this evening? Then Ray's going to hit the gavel, and we're going to adjourn. And we shall return here on Monday, February 24th.
Delegation is the key to success.